Hi, everybody. Nice to see some familiar names. It's so nice to join you again in July. July is not officially liver health, but July 28th is World Hepatitis Day, and that's related to the liver. And we're going to talk a little bit about hepatitis later on too. So I figured we already covered the kidney a few months ago. We covered the brain a couple of months ago. And so I'm going to take you on a tour of our liver system and what you need to know about that. And hopefully you will learn some of the following things here. Approximately 4.5 million adults in America have been diagnosed with liver disease, and about 2/3 of the diagnoses affect men. So we just had Men's Health Month in June, so I figured this would also tie in nicely to that as well. And a lot of these are somewhat preventable and also somewhat manageable, but we always want to make sure we're giving you as much information as possible. So when we're done, I hope you take away what you see here. I'm a dietitian, not your dietitian. So this is just educational and informational, not medical advice. Please make sure you are checking with your own personal doctors and healthcare teams before you do or change anything about your health and wellness regimens. Something about me, if you don't know who I am at this point, hello, I'm Dina D'Alessandro. I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist. I own and operate a part-time private practice, mostly out of New York City, and where I am right now in Ocean County, New Jersey, when I'm out of state visiting my sweet mom. This is where I operate out of here too. I'm also the adjunct lecturer up at CUNY Lehman College in the Bronx, where I teach nutrition science courses to undergraduate and graduate students, and I am the campus dietitian at the Student Health Center, and I do all these other things here too, trained and am credentialed in quite a lot of other ways. So thank you again for allowing me to be part of your community as well. Whenever we talk about these organ systems, I do like to give a little bit of an anatomy discussion as to what things are and where they're at. And so what you see in front of you here on this picture is this kind of like blobby shaped reddish colored organ that is our liver. And if you notice the language around it, hepatic, HEPA, hepatic, that is where, like in the language of hepatitis, that's what we're talking about when it's liver related. We have that as a prefix. So the liver is what's known as a highly vascular organ, much like our kidneys as well. It just means that there's a lot of blood vessels going through them. Specifically, whenever we have blood coming through and processing through our stomach and our intestines, it actually does pass through our liver. And rumors are true, our liver can regenerate, can regrow even after damage, but as I'm sure you can imagine, how much of too much is anything before something stops functioning altogether. So it can only recover so much before it becomes an issue. So this is why I hope with our discussions today, you'll take better care of your liver so we don't get to that point. That little green thing that you see, that little green sac with that green line going after it, that's your gallbladder. That is in charge of what is known as your bile salts, and that helps us with breaking down fats, and it also helps with excreting certain things as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the role of the gallbladder in our liver functions. I'm not sure if I put this in here or not, but I'll talk about it in a little bit later too. Our digestive system, so our gastrointestinal system is its own system. These are known as the accessory organs to it. So in addition to what the liver does, it also plays a role in digestive functions too. All right, so let's talk about liver functions. Friends, did you know there's over 500 vital functions that our liver performs on a daily basis? I'm only giving you 5 to focus on today. I couldn't fit 500 on this slide if I wanted to. When we see this word metabolism, that just means it's processing something. So when anything that we put into our mouth, into our body, into our gut, is going to go through either our liver or our kidneys. So in the case of the liver, it is processing food. It is there to help convert what we eat and turn it into energy. It is also processing drugs. So if we ingest or take in, consume alcohol, pharmaceuticals, or other kinds of substances, it's also processing that as well. There is, much like the kidneys too, it's taking the role of a detox too. It's going to be a self-cleaning entity. So as long as you have good functioning liver, it's going to help you filter out and excrete any of the waste product. And that's also where the gallbladder comes in as well. The gallbladder is going to be helping with that too, with, as I said, the accessory organ in the digestive activities. Storage. So the storage it takes in are things like iron. It helps store with that too. It also stores something known as glycogen, which is the storage form of glucose. We talked about glucose a while back with diabetes. That's like the blood sugar stuff that we have to help control. And we'll talk a little bit too of what the role is in liver, of what that does. It allows us to take that storage and use it and store it and back and forth. The synthesis just means it's producing something. So if you remember from, I think, our February webinar, we spoke about specifically cholesterol. You don't necessarily need to eat cholesterol because your body produces it, and it's produced in the liver. And our liver also produces certain proteins and what are known as clotting factors, right? We just said it's a highly vascular organ. There's a lot of blood stuff going on in there. So it helps with preventing us from any bleeds. And last but not least on here too, it helps with regulation of blood sugar. So your insulin and the responses of when you're eating, and cholesterol management as well. We'll see in some of the coming slides, if we have issues around this, if the liver cannot do what it needs to do, we'll see some of the warning signs that you can keep an eye out for if it's not functioning properly. There are many different types of liver diseases. Again, here I'm just giving you a handful of what you can see on screen. For the second, third, and fourth bullets, I'm going to talk about those separately a little bit more in detail. The first one here with bile duct disease. So again, bile is what's related to your gallbladder, and that helps with the processing of fats. So if you have an issue with your bile duct, and it's related to your gallbladder, you might be put on a low-fat diet, or you might have to have some fat substitutes because your body can't process it properly. Jumping down to hemochromatosis, heme, H-E-M-E, is the word that we use in conjunction with iron and red blood cells. So with somebody who has an issue, a disease state of hemochromatosis, it means that your body is unable to excrete or get rid of excess iron. When it processes and breaks down our red blood cells, it ends up building up in our system. And the workarounds for that, number one, avoiding or reducing any iron containing foods. And number two, in a more treatment sense, you would do what is known as phlebotomy or bloodletting to kind of get rid of that excess iron. The second to last bullet there for liver cancer, I'm actually going to talk about cancer in, I think, October's webinar. So I'll go a little bit more into detail there. But just a quick note about liver cancer. Obviously, tumors are involved. You have primary cancer, meaning that the cancer has started in the liver, and you have secondary cancer, meaning the cancer has started elsewhere in the body and then migrated or metastasized into your liver. Then the last one on there for Wilson disease, if you've never heard of that before, much like the hemochromatosis, it is the buildup of a mineral known as copper. So, vitamins and minerals, we use so much of different things that help our bodies function. And so if you have Wilson disease, you might be told you can no longer eat, or you have to limit copper containing foods, things like chocolate and nuts and shellfish, and even things like pots and pans, like copper coated pots and pans. By the way, same thing with hemochromatosis. You might not be able to use a cast iron skillet if you have hemochromatosis. All right, so let me talk a little bit more specifically about the other three things that I pointed out here that I'm highlighting. Cirrhosis is the excessive scarring of a liver. Like I said before, your liver can regenerate and can kind of like repair itself, but over the course of time, if there's a lot of damage going on, that scar tissue builds up over and over again. Much like, when you're getting these kind of blisters on your hands or your feet, after a while, it's just like this hardened type of skin that forms. And because the liver is related to so many different functions, if you're dealing with cirrhosis, you could end up being told you have to limit or avoid or reduce your salt and sodium intake, and even protein. Like we saw in the kidney issue, kidneys have protein sources that they produce and they process there. Same thing that I just mentioned with the liver. So you might speak with your doctor on putting you on a protein restriction if your liver can no longer process the protein sources. In extreme cases, this could be quite life-threatening. So obviously, in that case, you would end up talking to your doctor about what the late stage of these things would be in transplant. But hopefully, you can avoid that and you can slow down the progression. And you can see there the more common causes of this, the injury that is done to your liver, I'm going to talk about in the coming slides. And with the discussion around this too, like I said, with blood pressure, hypertension, the highly vascularness of that, you might also notice two things. So fluid restriction or a buildup in your body, something called edema, which is the swelling of your ankles and your legs, or ascites, where the fluid is building up around your abdominal area. So again, these can be potentially warning signs or things that you will speak to your doctor about if you are at risk for cirrhosis or you're getting down that path. All right, so let's talk about this. Used to be known as fatty liver disease and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I don't know why researchers in the medical profession make the language so much harder to understand. So now this is known as steatotic, which is just a fancy word for saying fatty liver disease. Anytime you see the steata, S-T-A-T, that means a fatty buildup. So somebody who's dealing with steatorrhea is dealing with stools that are oily or have an oily substance around them. So we have steatotic liver disease is kind of like the umbrella term. The one subcategory of that is alcohol-related liver disease. So this is going to be caused by excessive alcohol consumption, where it causes the fatty deposits to build up in the liver and then obviously affecting the function of that's happening there. In the case of alcohol-related liver disease, this is reversible only through abstinence. If you continue kind of ingesting the things that are causing the damage to happen, it can progress to more severe damage, and then you'll see from the slide before of what that ends up looking like if that is the extreme category. I say this every webinar, and I know some people don't love it, but the best thing is there is no safe level of alcohol. So the best you can do. But obviously, if you're dealing with something with excessive alcohol consumption, I would encourage you, make sure you have support systems around you, resources available to help you with stopping that. Okay, now under, again, the category of steatotic liver disease, this is what used to be called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now they've given us this terminology, metabolic dysfunction. So why so big and long with this name? We're just going to call it MASLD. So when you think of things like this is technically just like lifestyle related stuff. Metabolic dysfunction, the things that our body does in its normal daily basis of processing things, can be affected by excess body fat, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, right? Anything we just got done talking about what the liver is related to. Any issues that are dysfunctional there can then progress into those fatty deposits and cause what is known as this MASLD. And again, this can also progress to cirrhosis. And even though the main cause of this is not alcohol or excessive alcohol consumption, as you can see in that second bullet, even moderate alcohol can affect this particular condition. Okay, I'm just looking in the chat as well. Next up is viral hepatitis. So whenever you see itis, itis as a suffix, that means the inflammation or the inflammatory state. Hepatic, we said before, if you saw on that little anatomy slide, that just means liver. So the inflammation of the liver is its own thing. But in the case of what you're seeing on the screen here on this slide, this is related to virus. The reason why the inflammation is happening is because there's a virus that is occurring. So we have the three more common ones that you see in front of you are hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. Hepatitis A is about 20 to 25% of the cause of, I should say, of the diagnoses are going to be hepatitis A. This is primarily in relationship to poor hygiene or a cross-contamination, unsafe food, unsafe water. Thankfully, there is a vaccine available for this. So if you are at risk or you are working in an environment that is risky for that, then you can get vaccinated beforehand and hopefully not suffer the consequences. B and C are a little bit similar to each other in that the contact comes more through bodily fluids and blood contact. So either injections or transfusions or even tattoos, anything that's going to cross that that skin and break through that skin and go into the blood vessels. For hepatitis B, that is, I think they said 5 times more infectious than hepatitis C and more stable. So it can last a lot longer and cause more damage. So thankfully there's a vaccine available for that. With hepatitis C, not as crazy, but there are antivirals available for that. So there is no vaccine available for hepatitis C. Now I'm going to take you on a story time here, because this kind of relates to a lot of different things that we've talked about in our past webinars. When I did the dining out, excuse me, I did the dining out webinar when we talked about restaurants and food service and all that stuff. And then we also talked about food safety in general a while back when I think we were doing the National Nutrition Month in one of the March webinars. And so before I became a dietitian, I was a project manager at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And my very first day was February something 2008. Quite literally the weekend before I started, there was a hepatitis A outbreak at a restaurant known as Socialista. I can't remember if they're still in business or not. They might be, but they're in the West Village. And it was like, a fancy event, the Manhattan Glitterati. If I remember correctly, even people like Madonna and Demi Moore were there, if I'm not mistaken. So it was like a kind of big deal, fancy deal event that was going on. But unfortunately, one of the servers did not wash their hands properly. There was a transfer of fecal matter with the handing of different food, and maybe he was also bartending, I can't remember, and maybe touching ice and, giving people to drink. Within 24 hours of that event, patrons started showing up in ER and they started complaining of this outbreak of people were dealing with low fever, nausea, and abdominal pain. So the Department of Health dispatched, they deployed, they couldn't administer any treatment. The only issue is you have to kind of wait out all of these symptoms to subside, but they did give education to the restaurant and they started doing, messaging and making sure that people understood to follow certain food service policies, et cetera, et cetera. So you would think that's great. It never happens again. Lo and behold, 5 years later, it happened at Alta, a different restaurant, also in the West Village. So, sometimes people don't either implement what we're asking them to do, or it just takes a long time for people to really get the hang of things. So just keeping an eye out, not to scare you, just to be aware of these things can happen. And I have some very personal relationship to that. I want to give an honorable mention. So like I said, with your gallbladder, not, it's not part of the liver, but it's an accessory organ to it. So gallstones can form. Those are those hardened deposits of bile. Those are those salty acids that are found in storage form in the gallbladder. So the complications there could be asymptomatic, like you might not even know it's an issue. You don't feel any pain and it kind of resolves on its own, no treatment required. In other more severe circumstances, there might be medication. If you get your gallbladder removed, that is surgery. That's what's known as a cholecystectomy, or you might have an endoscopic procedure to see what's going on in there. And as you can see on the left-hand side, some of the risk factors there, again, related to the liver. High cholesterol could be an issue. High bilirubin. Bilirubin is just a term used of the kind of like the broken down red blood cells and that iron buildup. So anything that is building up and not able to be excreted or cleared out, or the gallbladder can't function properly, you can end up with gallstones there. So I want to stop here for a sec because I made a note that a while back somebody was asking me something, not related to gallstones. I think it was related to kidney stones, but it's tying into what I'm going to share with you. I'm a big fan of all different ways of modalities, whether you're doing the functional medicine approach or you're doing the more conventional treatments like pharmaceuticals and stuff, whatever you feel comfortable with and whatever's available to you. But with the caveat of just because somebody is using something, it might not apply, it might not be properly regulated. And one of the things that came up a while back was something called castor oil packs. So you might be familiar with this. They're just little packs of castor oil that you place, I think you heat them up and you place them on your abdomen area for a certain amount of time. And allegedly, they're said to reduce things like kidney stones, gallstones, and even ovarian cysts. Detoxifying effects. Again, the liver and the kidneys are detoxifying for you in their natural healthy state. But everything that I read as far as research is concerned, it feels very anecdotal, meaning it's just certain people's statements about whether or not things worked. There's no real research that supports that. So just with anything, I would just say, be careful if you do suffer from stones or if you're looking for some complementary alternative treatments, just be very conscientious of things that are not necessarily regulated very well. Okay, on this screen, I'm not at all going to read through all of this, but I just want to share with you some information, right? Not to scare you, not to give you fear of any kind, but just to understand that you should be informed and make proper decisions and be very, very cautious whenever you are putting anything into your body. So there's something known as drug-induced liver injury, and a lot of medications, a lot of herbal supplements can cause that to happen. What I'm going to disclaim here is most of this is very rare. And some of the ones that are kind of common are only common at larger, more mega doses and or long-term use of certain remedies or treatments. So if that is the case, like we saw in the toxicities and deficiencies webinar, I think that was last month or whatever it was, 2 months ago, we saw, hopefully you're being monitored, like your doctor's prescribing you for a mega dose of something or is putting you on a long-term treatment plan of something, but you're going to get tested every few months and making sure your blood tests are coming back normally. So these are usually things that if we start seeing some abnormal elevated panels or blood test liver enzymes, as we call them, coming up, they can resolve within a week or within a month of us stopping the treatment and or adjusting the dosage of that. Some of it is quick onset and some of it can be longer longer term. So again, just knowing what you're getting into, reading those, very fine printed inserts that you get with all of your medicines. And as you can see here, some of these things are over the counter, like acetaminophen. That's just Tylenol. Tylenol is over the counter, but it's not meant to be used in extreme levels or high doses and for long term. In fact, Tylenol bottles actually have a poison control number, and they tell you the max amount of what you can use that is no longer considered safe. Amoxicillin, that's just an antibiotic. You get a UTI or you have a bacterial infection. You're usually put on an antibiotic regimen for probably no more than 7 days, and then you're done. In the case of these two on here, Augmentin and isoniazid, they are the ones most likely to cause some liver injury. But again, most of these are mild and can resolve pretty quickly once we stop the treatment. The next one that I want to address is the NSAID. So that's the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So we have things like Advil and Aleve, again, very over the counter. But Cataflam is prescribed by your doctor. That's an oral pharmaceutical to take, and it's only by prescription. So that is one of the ones that have been seen as elevated liver function tests, but again, not enough to cause symptoms, but maybe to cause damage. So if you are on Cataflam, just make sure you're checking with your doctor as far as the dosage and how much you're planning to be on that for. Those things are usually, you should just be very, very short term. I'm going to jump down to, let's take a look, maybe the antifungal medication. So if you're dealing with a fungal infection, diflucan is on here too as something that should be monitored as a little bit more of a common issue. So again, starting and stopping treatment, being conscientious of how much is too much of what before you see the effects of that. Then the last three bullets on the right-hand side, that's kind of where I feel like I'm a little bit concerned about, because like I said, some people like to, supplement with certain things where they think, oh, it's a natural herbal remedy. What's the problem with it? Or in the case of dietitian land, we deal with a lot of people who are working towards a weight management goal. And nowadays, not nowadays, I mean, for many, many decades, the weight loss industry has been like multi-billion-dollar industry. They want you to keep taking their stuff and, losing and gaining weight. So here's where if you're on weight loss supplements or quote unquote detoxes that you're purchasing as meal supplement replacements, etc., be very, very careful, because again, we don't know what's in there. They're not highly regulated. They do go through the liver and or the kidney, and they can damage. And in the parentheses there, not to call anybody out, but to kind of call somebody out, Herbalife, which is a very well-known weight loss supplement company, there are over 50 clinical documented instances of liver injury that have been in medical journals over the past handful of years. So again, Herbalife kind of disputes this, but just be careful. Even if it feels like it's a well-known company that you think is going to be fine, even that can potentially do damage. So just be conscientious of, making well-educated decisions when you're purchasing things online or through whatever avenues you're going for. And then I'm jumping down to the herbal products there too. So black cohosh came up in helping manage menopause treatments or symptoms, I should say, like, hot flashes or brain fog. Again, it's not to scare you. It's not like you can't take these supplements, but just make sure you're being conscientious of how much or how long or what the dosage is. And I've never heard of kratom or kratom before, but it's a stimulant. It's an herbal stimulant. So I guess people who need a little bit of energy boost or to appetite stimulant too, or they don't like coffee, some of them might take a kratom instead, and that potentially could have side effects that affect the liver. So the considerations here, right? I train you all to keep in mind the educated consumer approach of this. Don't take more than the maximum or recommended amount. Don't take it for longer than you need it. Don't drink alcohol while you're ingesting it, and be careful also of any other potential interactions that might come into play. Read the labels, read those ridiculous two-page long inserts in there with all the fine print, any of the warnings that you need to know to follow. If you're concerned or curious or unsure, check with your pharmacist, check with your doctor for information. And if you are on these more long-term, whether it's pharmaceuticals or things like mega dosages of vitamin A or vitamin E or vitamin D, make sure you are going back and getting monitored by your doctor, because those things should only be short term, whether it's a couple of weeks or a couple of months, before they potentially could have some side effects that affect your your liver health. So thank you for letting me share all that in there. They could. So Matthew, again, it all depends on when or how often. So ideally, if you're on any medicine, especially if it's prescribed, you're probably going to go back and get tested for it. Like I know when I was on megadose vitamin D, I think I was going back like every 2 to 3 weeks to get tested to make sure there were no elevated liver enzymes. So it's possible that if you have an already existing condition, it could exacerbate it. But like I said, some of them are quite mild, some of them are somewhat rare, some of them have an onset that's pretty quick, but it resolves within like a week or a month. But any damage that is being done over the course of our lifetime or our decades of utilizing some of these pharmaceuticals or supplements, it could add up. So if you're noticing, we'll talk about it in a second, but if you're noticing when you're going to the doctor after maybe you've gotten rid of all of these drugs or these herbal remedies, and you're noticing these elevated enzymes, it might be something just to keep an eye out for and to talk to your doctor about. That is, is it making my current liver issues worse, or is it starting to progress into something I need to keep an eye out for? So thank you for your question. Next up here, I want to acknowledge fructose. Okay, so fructose is the naturally occurring fruit sugar, sugar found in fruit. We have a variety of different sugar molecules that we eat when we have our fruits and vegetables or our plant-based products. Glucose is the one that's most common when we talk about things like diabetes and blood sugar. And then we also have lactose, like lactose intolerance, right? Lactose is that naturally occurring sugar that's found in your milk and your dairy products. And so I bring this up only because in my profession, I hear so many people, and I also feel like it's out there on a lot of social media platforms too, of people telling other people to stop eating fruit. It's very high in sugar. It's very high in sugar. And so I just want to clarify where I think this is coming from, this conversation is coming from, why I think people keep saying fruit is bad. Fructose does not necessarily metabolize. It doesn't get processed through the body in the same way that the other sugars do. It kind of bypasses some stuff. And technically speaking, anytime we're not utilizing our food, especially the carbohydrates, the sugar molecules that are within that carbohydrate family, it is going to package in to what is known as your triglycerides. So same thing with fructose specifically, kind of goes straight there to begin with. And so that can increase the level of your triglycerides. And if you remember from our cholesterol discussion, right, that's the family of cholesterol. You have high or I should say good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, and then triglycerides. Those are the things that you're going to see on your blood test. So it's possible if you're not utilizing the food that you're eating and burning that off, or you are more prone to collecting excess amounts of different kinds of sugar, this can package up in triglycerides and can increase body fat percentage. It can affect some of your insulin too. But as you can see on the slide, left-hand side, like these are your naturally occurring fructose products, your fruits and your vegetables and even honey. These also come with really good nutritional qualities. Like there's a lot of antioxidants in these things, very robust vitamins and minerals. And it's a great way sometimes too to substitute if you are trying to manage your blood sugar of not having desserts and doing something like berries or cherries or, having something like a sweet treat instead. So I don't want to tell people that this is bad. I never want anybody to think that fruit is bad. Where I believe the problem lies is under what's known as like high fructose corn syrup, when there is added sugar to products that are considered more ultra or highly processed. So on the right hand side here, you're seeing, some like condiments or sugar sweetened beverages or pastries, all the fun stuff, right? So I would rather you, be mindful of your fruit consumption. Okay, fine, but don't completely avoid your fruit and then go off and, be attacking all of these other kinds of like more highly processed things with added sugars in it. That's really where the issue is. And if I think I mentioned this in the cholesterol discussion too, where if you're monitoring your cholesterol, it's not necessarily taking away the whole foods and things like eggs and butter and cheese. It's more about being conscientious of the added excess fats and sugars and salts into those more highly processed foods. So I just want to share that because I feel like this rumor out there of like, stop eating fruit, fruit's going to kill you, fruit is causing cancer. That's not true. It's not true at all. Just be conscientious of how much you're eating of anything. Diversify your diet, but be careful, more careful about like the high fructose corn syrup and those added sugar things. All right, thanks for letting me get on my soapbox there. Okay, so kind of at a glance with what we're talking about with overall risk conditions. So yeah, generally speaking, as we age, we have different changes in our body that can put us more at risk for things. Things start breaking down. It's a little bit more sluggish. And or we also have kind of like coexisting chronic conditions that can put us at risk for things too. Like I mentioned before, sometimes one thing leads to the other and something else leads to something else, whether it's your kidney or your liver. So you might start off with a lower level liver disease state that then progresses to cirrhosis, that then progresses to what is known as end stage liver disease. We'll talk about that in a second. When it comes to those viral hepatitis conditions, that is where we have that cross-contamination, hygiene issues, blood transfusions, blood connections or cross-contamination there, toxins as well, like we're talking these toxic levels of chemicals that, right, drugs or anything that is going to be processed through our breathing, our eating, and going through the liver, possible that's going to put us at risk too. So, you can only control so much. You can't stop what the air pollution is doing to you, but maybe you can be more conscientious with some of the other things that you're ingesting or being in contact with. So on the next slide here, as I said earlier, sometimes the symptoms it's very asymptomatic. Like you don't even know there's something going on. And if you're not going to the doctor other than like every year just for your physical exam, or you're forgetting to go for checkups, you might not know if something is elevated or abnormal. And if it progresses to the point where it's a little bit more extreme, again, doesn't mean that this is worst case scenario. It just means it's an indication if something is a little bit off. You can see again that breakdown, that buildup, that inability to clear things out of our body can lead to discoloration literally in our skin. That's known as jaundice. Or you can notice it. I always say turn around when you're done in the bathroom, right? Turn around to see if you're hydrated enough, if there's foaminess in your urine. That could be protein issues related to kidneys or livers, or if there's darkly colored urine in there, that could also be related to a kidney or a liver issue too. Difficulty with digesting and processing fats, or you notice, again, I mentioned before with that steatorrhea, there could be like an oiliness to your feces or a light colored to it. If you are noticing signs that you are losing muscle mass or involuntary losing some weight as well, again, systems are all interrelated, so you want to keep an eye on that too. And again, kind of like worst case scenarios, because the buildup of the toxins or the inability of your body to detoxify and clear things out, you might notice things like a musty smelling breath. It says mild brain impairment. I mean, we've all been there. Like brain fog doesn't automatically mean the worst case scenario. But just the reason why I bring things like this up is because a lot of times people ask me, oh, should I track my food and should I weigh and measure stuff? And you don't have to go that far, but especially as we age, and especially if we're dealing with multiple different kinds of chronic conditions, we're managing a bunch of things, we're taking a lot of supplements or pharmaceuticals, just keep a log of things. Try to notice if there's patterns. If all of a sudden you're noticing like, that's interesting. This didn't happen before, but now this is starting to show up every so often. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. Maybe it's something that you can bring with you the next time you go to your doctor. Or if you're noticing patterns that are becoming more consistent, then you can go and make sure you set up an appointment to find out what the root cause of something is and potentially stop it from getting worse. So here's a list of some of the screenings and diagnoses that are related, I mean, not just to liver stuff, but specifically to liver. That third bullet there, when you're looking at your comprehensive, what's known as your comprehensive metabolic panel of your blood test, usually you're going to have some standard things that are always on there, and your ALT, AST, those are your liver enzyme tests. So that's something just to keep an eye out for. Sometimes they're abnormal because you're fighting an infection, or maybe you're dealing with some inflammation of some sort. But if you're noticing a consistent pattern of that, you want to make sure you're addressing that with your doctor. Again, as things progress here, if there's things that you can't really rule out, they might send you for a CT scan or an endoscopy. And liver biopsy, my understanding is that's really, when they take the tissue sample from it and they test that out, that's really sometimes the only way they can determine which category or subcategory of that fatty liver disease that you are being diagnosed with. So that's again, that's something that, as best case scenario to worst case scenario, you can kind of see from top to bottom here, just keeping information in mind and making sure you're getting tested and screened as often as possible. All right, kind of recapping a little bit about some of the quote unquote treatments. So how do we acknowledge or manage the things that we might be diagnosed with? Sometimes it's dietary adjustments, as in, eat a little bit more wholer foods, or if you are dealing with Wilson disease or bile duct disease or hemochromatosis, you might be moving away or removing completely some ingredients or some food groups from it. Bullet number 2, obviously stopping consuming alcohol. The medications there, either you're taking medications to help with the condition that you're dealing with, or you are, like I showed you in a few slides ago, you might be alternating or altering the dosage and the frequency in which medications are being given to you. That's a conversation you have with your doctor. We talked before too about phlebotomy, bloodletting. Again, if there's that buildup of iron in your liver, that's the hemochromatosis issue. That might be a treatment or an intervention. And then I don't have it written here, but when we did the kidney disease discussion, there's 5 stages of kidney disease before you come to the end of the end stage of your kidney disease. And then the options there were either dialysis or transplant. In the case of liver, there's 4 stages before you get to the end of your end stage liver disease, and your only option there is transplant. You can live with 1 kidney, but you can't live with no liver, unfortunately. So how do we try to make sure that we're mitigating all of this? Do the best you can with what you got. Try to limit or avoid alcohol consumption, quote unquote, risky behavior. If you know you're injecting needles or you're doing blood transfusions, you're coming in contact with people who might be infected, just be really conscientious about that. Seek treatment, seek support, reach out to people who can provide you with resources. If you know you're at risk for something, make sure you're looking into getting vaccinated or getting prepared in a way that you can avoid having something be an issue. Be mindful with your medication. Like I said, read your labels, ask your pharmacist, talk to your doctor about stuff, right? We talked about how I go to my mom's doctor's appointments with her. If I weren't there, she would just go, nod her head and leave. And I'm the one, like, taking notes and asking questions and making sure we read through all of those medical documentations and the inserts whenever she's being prescribed with things. So, being, again, an educated consumer, I guess is how we can call it here too. Keeping your food safe. If you remember a while back, I think I just said this, right? With the National Nutrition Month webinar that we did a while back, we talked about best by dates and use by dates and when to throw food out and how to keep things from cross-contaminating, keeping things sanitary, or if you're eating out, being careful and conscientious of the food environment that if people are feeding you. And washing your hands often. I mean, you don't have to be completely sterile. There's something to say about, developing a good, strong immune system, but also as we age, by nature, we become more immunocompromised, especially if we are also managing a variety of different chronic conditions that end up kind of suppressing or putting our immune system at risk. So you don't have to sterilize every single thing all the time, but washing your hands, especially if you're going to be touching food or after you've touched food, try not to put things, touch your eyes after you've touched doorknobs and things like that. Just being conscientious and as clean as possible. All right, now my area of expertise finally comes into play, right? Nutrients and food and all the things. None of this is surprising, right? You know all the tricks you need to do to keep your body healthy. Antioxidants, a fancy word of just saying things that help protect our cells and prevent things from getting damaged. So the more vibrantly colored foods, fruits and vegetables, plant-based foods in general can be really helpful for that. Fiber, that also helps with regulating our blood sugar and our cholesterol and keeps our digestive system regular. So in the hierarchy of fiber containing foods, we have things like beans and lentils and chickpeas and also avocado and all of your leafy greens, and then healthy fats too, like olive oil, salmon, tuna, and nuts. So if you're looking to do your meal planning this week, this weekend, consider some areas of opportunity. Where is that ratio? Is it 50-50 split? I'm in charge, I'm in control, I'm making some pretty good choices, or am I eating a lot of takeout stuff? Am I going through a lot of higher ultra processed foods? Try to see if you can alter that and switch the balance into the more whole, minimally processed foods, things that you're kind of a little bit more in control of. I do not like broccoli, but I put that picture on there for those of you that do like broccoli, but any cruciferous vegetable is really good. Again, fighting cancer and helping protect our body in general and supporting our cholesterol management too. Cruciferous vegetables could be things like kale and cabbage and Brussels sprouts. I think we talked a while back too, inflammation. We did the inflammation webinar about things like turmeric or green tea or different herbs and spices that are also providing us with anti-inflammatory properties. So it's not like you have to just do all things with just these ingredients of food. You can also add in other things to it that can help support your overall health. And of course, staying hydrated with water. Ideally, that is your main source of hydration. The thing with this that I don't have listed on here as kind of like the honorable mentions also are the other lifestyle factors as best as you possibly can. Have your body moving however you can move it as often as you can. Get that blood and that oxygen flowing, get those joints lubricated. Again, make sure you're working with somebody if you need some more physical therapy or occupational therapy assistance in that. But really anything you can do, chair exercises, just moving your wrists and your ankles around and getting that blood and oxygen going. If you're dealing with stress and sleep issues, please make sure you try to prioritize that too, because that's all related to cellular function and metabolism issues. We want to make sure that you're not taking on too much, that you have some support, that you can talk to somebody, or you journal, or you integrate some sort of mindful techniques like we did a while back where we talked about mindful health and wellness. And sleep, trying to, it's a little harder sometimes said than done, especially when you're dealing with all these fluctuations in temperature, very hot, uncomfortable situations. Like try to make sure you're getting enough sleep throughout your evening as well. So, in I think one of the other discussions we had, I gave some organizations. If you're looking to get some resources, whether you are a patient with liver conditions or you're helping support people who are dealing with liver conditions, you can look towards World Hepatitis Alliance, American Liver Foundation, and the Global Liver Institute. The NIDDK, we saw that guy come up, the National Institute of Diabetes, Digestive, and Kidney Diseases. That is the governmental foundation that does a lot of the research towards that. And even though it doesn't have the word liver in it, because we said liver is an accessory organ to the digestive system, they do liver research as well. So you can look online for things like that too, resources, or just to get more information if you want to. So as we're coming up on the end of our discussion, I always like to kind of say, what are you taking away so far from this? Are there things that you've been meaning to do? Now's a great time. We're kind of in the second half of the year. Time is a social construct, I understand, but if you're looking towards your calendar and you're like, let me breathe new life into recommitting and reintegrating some priorities to help support my health, what are some things you want to start doing that you haven't done? What are things that you've been doing? Like maybe you're already eating broccoli and you're doing a lot of that stuff that I mentioned before to help support your liver, and you want to keep doing that. And are there things that no longer serve you that you feel it's time for you to stop doing that? Whether it's alcohol cessation or stress or other things that you feel are no longer supporting your health. So if you will humor me before I go on to this last slide and before I go into the Q&A stuff, I just want to share, because I mentioned to Matthew, sometimes I work with students and sometimes I work with interns and we kind of like bear the responsibilities and I can spread it out. And sometimes I'm flying solo, but I didn't do this in the proper format, but I just want to share with you in the last two slides here that you sometimes don't get to see as part of the end of the slides of all of the research that I look through. Some of these are just governmental sites that are easily accessible for any population. Some of these are really specific journal articles. Some of these are very specific to the condition or to the disease state or to the different life cycles that I work with. And so I just want to share with you all of the stuff that I look through that help me create these webinars for you, because yeah, I'm a dietitian, but like, maybe you believe what I'm talking about and maybe you don't, but I definitely put in a lot. I think it's about 10 or so hours just to do a 45-minute webinar over the course of every month.
This was very interesting. You touched on a lot of stuff that I've heard about over the course of my life or have impacted me.
Yeah.
Would you say that fatty liver is the most common, I guess, negative liver diagnosis?
I don't know if I can speak to that. If it's most common, I don't know if it's the most common. I know, what did I say? The fatty liver, no, I think liver disease in general was something like 2% of the population. So I don't, obviously it's not as bad as like heart disease. I don't think it's as prevalent, but 2% of the American population is about 4 million or so, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know the distinctions between the categories of the disease states, unfortunately, Matthew. Like, I don't know if fatty liver disease is more prevalent or if, like I said, hepatitis is coming up as the more prevalent. Um, Hepatitis A is like 25% of the diagnoses there, but I don't know if I came across anything that tells me what the statistics are for fatty or non-fatty. Yeah.
Okay, and a kind of related question. Um, is if the doctor says you have fatty liver, does that mean that you're overweight? And is there any connection between
It doesn't necessarily mean that. Fatty means just in the sense of like when we talk about fatty fish, it means that there's fat in it. So there's fat in your liver. Yes, it could be related somewhat to weight distribution, but it could also be insulin resistance. It could be alcohol related. So in fatty liver, it could be alcohol related or it could be other issues there. So I'm using the old terminology. In non-alcoholic fatty liver, it could be related to other metabolic things or high cholesterol things. So what I try to always say whenever anybody talks about weight, it's not, there are correlations to things of excess, right? I'm putting this in quotations. Whatever your body is distributing as composition of fat and muscle and organs and blood and fluids, etc., it's how that is affected for you. So there could be correlations that excess body fat could lead to fatty liver disease, but it doesn't automatically mean that anyone with excess fat is going to have fatty liver, or people who don't have excess body fat cannot get fatty liver. Like it's not discriminating against anybody. So it really, as much as I hate this answer as a dietitian, it depends. It always depends on all of that stuff. What did we say the risk factors for that was? It was a variety of different things. Like the alcohol one is specific to alcohol. The one that's was used to be called non-alcoholic is now called metabolic dysfunction, steatotic liver disease, right? That's the one that used to be called non-alcoholic. Um, and that one is the one with the metabolic issues, like if you have high cholesterol or type 2 diabetes, or if you do have excess body fat, yes, but you could also have high triglycerides and not have excess body fat. So it really depends. Sorry, Matthew.
no problem. But I did notice that several, you mentioned like basically over the counter weight loss
Yeah, supplements.
supplements, yeah,
Hmm.
as potentially being negative for the liver. Do you know with all these new weight loss drugs if they're having the same effect or is that
So
something?
I'll say this, the GLP-1s and Manjaro and stuff, any pharmaceutical that we put into our body is either going to be processed through the kidneys or the liver. In the case of the GLP-1s, it cuts off a pathway of something, but I don't know how it metabolizes throughout the body. But again, it's one of those things where what are the consequences? That's going to attack kind of like the digestive system. And we just got done saying the liver and the gallbladder are related as an accessory organ to the digestive system. So could it potentially affect that? I don't think we currently have research that we can rely on because a lot of this is still kind of new. And so
Yeah.
we need like 20 years to go by before we can start seeing what the side effects might be. But with any pharmaceutical, if it's long term or if it's specific dosage, it could potentially affect the organs that detoxify our body, which either are the kidneys or the liver or both.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone. Have a good summer. See you next month.
Bye bye.
Bye.